we're meeting someone who has about 52. If they have any one of our defects and we produce an offspring, every one of our offspring has a 1 in 4 chance of expressing that disorder. And so that's why you get these genetic defects in the best of families and the poorest of families. Random and intermittent. The Anunnaki knew the math. Random and intermittent. And that's the way they strike us. So it wasn't a problem for them to leave the disorders in. And they didn't. They had a deadline, and they'd make the mistakes and move on. Okay? All right, here we go. Notice, if you will, this is a comparison of the chromosomes of humans, chimpanzees, gorillas, and orangutans. Notice. Now, notice how similar they are first. Again, remember, 99% with chimpanzees, same DNA, 98% gorillas, so the chromosomes are, of course, going to be fairly similar. What makes us so incredibly different? Well, there's some pretty unique, some pretty odd changes that we have in our chromosomes. We're going to talk about that for a minute. We're the Anunnaki. We come to Earth. We decide we want to make a slave with the creature, using the creature of Earth as a genetic base. What is the first problem we come up against? We test its chromosomes and we find, 48 chromosomes. 48 chromosomes. All primates have 48 chromosomes. But we, the Anunnaki, only have 46. Now, why do I say that? Because we, the humans, have only 46. Now, if we're descended from these guys, where did we lose 2 whole chromosomes? That is a heck of a lot of DNA, folks. We shouldn't be anything like them if we lost 2 whole chromosomes. That's a lot of DNA. How did that happen? How could that happen? Well, okay, we're the Anunnaki. We come in, we have 46 chromosomes. The creature we want to start working with has 48. We've got a problem because we want to make a zygote, and we need to make a zygote, a living thing that is a combination of the two, of the 48 and the 46. How can we do that? Well, there's only one way. We take the 20. Now remember, the 48 is 24 from the egg, 24 from the sperm. The 46 is 23 from the egg, 23 from the sperm. So we have to make one or the other of the 24s go to 23, or we have to make one or the other of the 23s go up to 24. But again, can you cut a whole chromosome off of the 24 and still have the same creature of Earth? No, you cannot. Can you add a whole chromosome to yourself, to your 23, and still be an Anunnaki? No, you cannot. So what do you do? How do you get in the game here? How do you even get started on this process? There is only one way, and one way only. You have to take 2 of the chromosomes in the 24, and you have to fuse the 24 together, 2 of their chromosomes. Fuse them together so that you have all of the genetic material of the 24 chromosomes, but it's now taking up only one place. You have cheated nature. You have turned a 24 into a 23 without losing any of the DNA. You with me on this? All right, now let's look at the close-up. Next slide, please. A close-up of this number 2 chromosome right here. The number 2. Here we go. Look at the rest of it. In the orangutan, it's a 2 and a 3. In the gorilla, it's a 2 and a 3. In the chimp, it's 2 and a 3. But in us, it is a single. It is fused. The 2 and the 3 is fused. They just looked down the chromosomes, and they looked, and at the first one they could see where there were 2 together on the human, they fused it. There you go. Now, how do you think Mother Nature would have done this in 200 to 250,000 years? Wouldn't it happen in 1,000,000 years? Probably not 10 million years. Evidence is pretty clear, isn't it? Pretty darn clear. Okay, next slide, please. I think it's fair to say that, in fact, everything we do know about human origins is wrong. That we were, in fact, created by the gods with a small g through the equivalent of a test tube, the genetics, that we originally began life as, hair-covered hominoids, and that our humanity did, in fact, emerge from that. Now, we're going to take a little break. That's the end of it. And I'll sign books for those of you that want them. And we'll come back in about 10, 15 minutes, and we'll answer questions. Okay? Lights, please.
tracing back on primates? And if so, how far back does that go?
I don't know the result of the tests. I think that they have. It seems logical that they would, and I'm sure that it would go back millions of years for them, probably.
It'd just be an interesting.
Yeah, I really don't know that it's been done, but I assume that it has, at least cursorily, not to the depth that they've done else, just to see. But I'm sure, I mean, we got the bones we're looking at. We know they go all the way back 20, 30 million years to the Miocene, so I'm pretty sure. I mean, it's just obvious. Okay.
This planet at 3,600
Nibiru, yes.
I mean, it's got to be pretty cold when you're that far
Yeah.
away from the sun.
Mhm.
So why wouldn't they just
Well,
take over the Earth
without our
right there?
atmosphere, we would be the moon. It's a question of atmosphere. How do you get an atmosphere? You have internal heat. Your internal heat comes up carrying, as you see, moisture. You saw the picture. If you have that, you're going to grow an atmosphere. You're going to create an atmosphere. Wherever you are. It's not dependent on the sun at all. It's dependent on you and your internal heat generation. So all the outer planets have it. All the outer planets have atmospheres, except Pluto, and it's got a little bit of one, but not much. So the atmosphere is not a problem. Now the problem is, of course, light. What do they do for light? Because they're not seeing the sun ever as much more than a star. So that's a problem. And the answer to it is this. When Voyager went out to Uranus, not Neptune, to Uranus, it found that Uranus has something about itself they call it electron glow. It has a kind of a glow that's inexplicable. It's a phosphorescence in the atmosphere like a firelight, basically. And so if you imagine that as a property of Nibiru, but expanded to a higher degree, then it would carry its own light. And the Sumerians are pretty clear that it's a very bright planet, and it's really bright. And the Anunnaki themselves have a kind of glow about themselves, an ethereal kind of glow. So that if one were to be standing beside me, you could easily tell the difference between us. He'd have something you could see shining off around him or her. So that was why messengers of the Lord, God, whatever you want to call them, angels, were always depicted as having halos around themselves. That became the image to depict one of the Anunnaki, that glow. So if we assume they're creatures of their environment, they would have that kind of glow, carry their kind of own light around with them, and the planet probably generates its own light. Yes,
To answer your question, whenever they sent the probe out there around Uranus, they found that it liberates 3 times more energy than it receives from the sun. So it is radiating energy.
and so
It has its own internal energy source.
Okay, any others? Let's go. Okay.
In these cylinder seals, when you see the Anunnaki in other drawings and ancient documents, the gods are quite often depicted as being really big. Now,
Well,
would that be just a stylization, or is that a literal interpretation?
when you see the cylinder seals in pictures and images that I'm aware of, you see basically what you saw here. They're the same size. Now you can see ones in isolation that look big, like the Oannes picture of the guy with the scale, wearing the fish scales and all that. But to my knowledge, that I'm aware, I haven't seen many examples where, I can't recall any examples where someone depicted as a god is any substantially larger than humans. I think they always are depicted as our size, again, in our image, after our own likeness. So I think that they're going to turn out to be like us, the basic Anunnaki. Now, you do have other reports, and Cindy knows a lot more about this than I do, of very large humanoid type creatures. You have the insectoid type creatures that are like human body physiologically, but more like an insect. You have the reptilians, you hear talk about them. So I'm not saying that they aren't others, but I'm saying that your average typical nickel-dime Anunnaki is going to look basically like us, and will probably be the ones that are called the Nordics among those different people that are supposedly out there. I think the ones that are the true blue Anunnakis are going to be the Nordics. That's what I think, based on my own research. Again, Cindy has a much more in-depth view of that than I have. Okay?
Lloyd, have you heard about a relatively recent scientific explanation for the explosion of life at the Cambrian stage? I think it's called panspermia, put forward by an astronomer by the name of Boyle.
Right.
And it's very close.
Fred Hoyle is the guy that made the analogy of the tornado sweeping through the junkyard. That's Fred Hoyle. And that's not really new. They put that forward in the 60s, he and a guy from India. But really, it's becoming accepted now because it's pretty clear that life did not evolve, could not evolve here. And what Fred Hoyle and the other guy had said was it had to come from off Earth. It couldn't, and it had to come advanced, complete, and whole. They were the first guys to look at the facts and say, it's obvious it came from somewhere else. Comets, asteroids, meteorites, something brought it here. But of course, they were absolutely, just ridiculed into silence initially because it didn't fit the Darwinian paradigm of the gradual, building up of things. So it's not new, but it is like it's new because it's being taken seriously now.
Well, I think the interesting thing about that is it seems like science is getting closer to this idea that you're espousing and Cindy is espousing about Samaria, because if you believe that, you've got to believe that there's other life out there that's much further advanced than ours, that then was transported through outer space for maybe hundreds of years.
I think we're on the way, kids. I think all of us sitting here in this room could be fairly classified as members of the fringe. We are a fringe group. Anybody sitting in a Meat-Mon meeting is going to be a fringe person. We are in a very small minority as we sit here doing this. Look at us, how few our numbers are. We're a small minority right now. But I think the tide is turning, and what I see as one of my fundamental jobs is to take the information that I have, the book that I have, this presentation that you've seen, and put it before as many people as I can to try to turn that tide, to try to raise the numbers of the fringe. But I can't do that. I can't get the mainstream to pay attention to me until I have enough people in the fringe paying attention to me. You see, so I've just got to grind it out doing these meetings like we're having here until hopefully there will come some kind of critical mass will be reached, and suddenly the mainstream will start paying attention to me and Cindy and others like us who have this message. But I do think that the wall is like the Berlin Wall. The bricks are starting to fall out, like what you're talking about. The evidence is mounting up. You can see how clear it is. And all it takes is somebody like us to come out and just say, hey, the emperor has no clothes. Really, that's it. The emperor. They're all just blinding themselves to the facts. And it just takes somebody to stand up there and say, you're wrong, and here's where you're wrong, and here's an idiot. A child can see this. There's nothing fantastic about this. These are just facts. They're facts. I mean, I pulled all this stuff out of their books. You didn't see anything fantastical there, or phantasmagorical, or metaphysical. Nothing that was channeled down to me from somewhere. It's right out of their books. It's their facts that they just don't deal with. That's all it is. Yes.
I had a question. When your research, did you come across anything where scientists had obviously found something since it didn't, evidence that since it didn't fall into the Darwinian theory, that they just kind of got pushed aside and it's an anomaly and we'll just set it aside here? Did you talk to anybody that they said, yeah, there's things out there, but it doesn't fit our idea, so it just gets, brushed under the carpet, so to speak?
Well, that's really all you saw. I mean, what you were looking at is one after another of those very things. I mean, for example, the first life form. Again, we've known since Hoyle put that out that the first life form was a very advanced prokaryote, not the simple little thing, but what scientists say is, well, okay, no matter how far back those prokaryotes appear, if the Earth coalesced at 4.5 billion years ago, and the life begins to appear at 4 billion years ago, then somehow in that 500 million years, when the Earth is just a seething, freaking ball of lava, somehow the elements came together and made, the lightning bolt and all that. When, again, it's totally impossible because things are blowing apart. They're breaking apart under high temperature. They're not coming together. They're going apart. It's absolutely contradictory to the laws of physics. And yet they say no matter what, there had to have been that first lightning bolt thing but see, you saw it, you can look at it. The prokaryote would have thousands of those first things in it. I mean, it's just clear it's alive, but